My name is Roy Benalta. I'm based here in New York. I've been with Amazon Web Services actually next month. It will be 5 years. So I'm part of AWS Platform Business Development team. I've worked with, I would say, thousands of customers mainly on machine learning and data and analytics. That's my core of expertise. But I had several roles at Amazon, from solution architect and also business development team. And I'm very excited to have Felix Gray today. And before we start with the question, maybe you will introduce yourselves.
I'm David Roger. I'm one of the co-founders and the CEO of Felix Gray.
Hi guys, Chris Benedict, co-founder as well, and CRO.
My name is Houtan, and I am the Chief Technical Officer of Felix Gray.
Cool. So for those who are not familiar with Felix Gray, maybe you can tell us like the story and, what is Felix Gray, basically, for those who are not familiar here in the audience.
Yeah, sure. So Felix Gray started, I was working for the CEO of Zappos, Tony Hsieh, on his startup in Las Vegas called Downtown Project. And I was in front of a screen for like 12 hours a day. And my eyes started to kill me at the end of every day, kind of, rubbing my eyes at the end of the day. Didn't really want to look at any more screens, kind of had this nagging headache. Actually ended up meeting Chris through a friend. He had moved from Chicago to New York. My friend Lizzie was dating his friend Don. And Lizzie said, "Hey, Chris, what do you do all day?" He's like, "I stare at 4 screens for 15 hours a day, is working at UBS." And so my friend's like, "Oh, my friend's starting this company, Felix Gray, blah, blah." And Chris and I met. Chris just wanted to be a beta tester. We kind of shared the same vision of where we saw this going, that everyone's in front of a computer and half the people were complaining about it, and why wasn't there an adoptable solution, and thought that it needed to be something that married fashion with function and told a really strong brand story, and that could make a compelling case for why people should wear what's called computer eyewear.
What is exactly like computer eyewear? Like I saw like in YouTube you're mentioning it, like what is it exactly?
Yeah, I think like the category kind of gets called as like computer glasses, and so that's lenses that are going to be specifically designed for screen use. So it's going to filter blue light, eliminate glare, which are 2 of the main culprits behind a lot of the negative symptoms of being in front of a screen all day. So that involves like the headaches or the dry eyes or the blurry vision, the eye fatigue, or even the sleep disturbances that come from blue light and glare.
One of the things that we always hear from startup, like, is there the time that you sit in the garage or at home and I have an idea, and how do you get into production? Like, can you like describe like the journey, like from ideation to really go to production and have something here and you have in the back some samples?
So it was, computer glasses were a thing. We didn't invent computer glasses. The issue is they were ugly. And we used to joke about at work, as I'm sure David did at Downtown Project. Everybody knew what they were. If you had symptoms that you want to take care of, you could do a quick Google search and find that there's these things called computer glasses. They're ugly. People would joke about them. They wouldn't wear them into a corporate office because it didn't fit the attire, right? Or they had, you could get them from eye doctors, but they were extremely expensive, like hundreds of dollars expensive. The idea was kind of there. I think our idea was making it fit and give it the ability to be adoptable in where they're most needed, which is like corporate America. So the idea was really to create, as David mentioned, a beautiful product around there and move it out of that kind of nerdy developer, gamer, sitting in mom's basement type of thing, and just bring it into the mainstream and say, okay, there is a solution. You can have a healthier relationship with technology. You're at your best when you look and feel your best, and we thought those were 2 main components. I think that was kind of like the idea, is like marrying that those 2 components. So it wasn't like an aha moment in a garage per se. It was more, there was quite a bit leading up to it with people we worked with talking about it, complaining about it. I think the aha moment was more like, this is a really big issue. Like there's a lot of people that are complaining about this, but there wasn't anyone addressing it yet. So that's what we set out to do.
When you start developing it, like one of the things we discussed, like you had the beta testing like for like 4-month cycle, which it's quite long. Like usually brands like using very short, small tests and launch. Like you did like 4 months. Can you like share like what was the hypothesis behind it, or like it's something like you thought that you will do it for weeks and started?
Yeah, that answer is actually pretty easy. We bootstrapped it and we didn't have a way to market it any other way. We had the little party round we raised went to like the first 1,000 pairs of glasses that they got delivered to David's apartment. We had to QA them ourselves all night. So we really didn't have a way to go out at any digitally or at any size of scale. So we thought, well, we know people that work all over the city. A lot of them are the inspiration for doing this. Let's see if we can get invited inside these places. And that's really what we did. I mean, it wasn't just to market it. It was to, we had a little bit different of a product back then. And because the first shipment that we had, our first product, it was pretty limited, and I think we had three glasses in like 3 different colors each, or 2 different colors, some of them. And that's all we could afford. Like, that was everything. That was the house right there. So we used it also to figure out, what did people like? Like, we had kind of a small frame, a medium frame, and a larger frame. How many people fit in the small? How many people fit in the medium? What colors did they like? And also, it's not an instant gratification product. You have to wear it for it to work. So that's kind of what we do with that. So by nature, each of those office try-ons took 2 weeks. And it gave us a way to go in there, kind of educate people, first, that there's a reason your eyes hurt. 2, there's a solution, and we have the solution, and try it for yourself. And we gave them the ability to purchase at the end, or they could return it. It was, it wasn't like a sales pitch. It wasn't crammed down anyone's throat. It was just genuinely trying to help people. But it started spreading pretty quickly, and I think that's another reason why it went long, to that length is, people talk, right? So it was like, okay, we would do it at one company, and then all of a sudden we would get emails or texts from friends saying, hey, can you do this at our company? Can you do this at our company? And it was still just 2 of us. So it was, it went that whole length up until really the accelerator days. So it started out of necessity. We realized we could learn a lot with it, and it had kind of this, I don't want to say guerrilla marketing, but kind of, this lower level marketing to it, where it's just word of mouth that was working. So we learned a lot about the customers. We learned a lot about the product. I worked in banking and finance, so I was only exposed to one type of culture before this. So I think it was really good to go into all these offices and say, like, oh, this is what it's like at a startup or at Google, or, so you get to learn a lot about your customers in that too. If we would have went straight to market, I think that we would have had a pretty narrow perception of what our customers were. So there's a bunch of reasons why it started, because there was no other way.
I would just say for that, I think there's when we first started, we said, okay, we're not going to raise a ton of money to do something that's a new market segment, right? We're not just making another mattress, another toothbrush, another suitcase, or something that we know people are going to buy. This is a new product category for a lot of people. Is this something that people actually want to buy? And so for us, it's really helpful to go into offices, learn what people liked, what messaging they liked, what messaging resonated with them, what things they liked about the product, what they didn't like about the product, and then tweak from there, as opposed to just opening it up and saying, hey, we're doing this thing, come buy it. It was way better to be on the grounds and say, like, well, would you buy it? And if so, why would you buy it?
Putting my engineer hat, and for the time you put into production, was there any specific tweaks you did from engineering perspective as you learned?
The biggest thing was the lens was a lot more yellow. So the way to filter blue light, there's a few different ways, but generally you need a lens to be somewhat yellow. We realized with our earlier stuff that it was a more effective way of filtering blue light, but it was going to be way less adoptable because it looked too yellow. And so for us, we said, okay, let's filter a little less. Let's get down to 50% instead of 75%. If people are actually going to buy and wear this, you'd rather people buy and wear something than 2 people wear something that's a little bit better.
Interesting. Okay, so now let's switch gear. You go to production, and of course you leverage Amazon Web Services. What did you use in AWS? Probably it's for a question.
Oh, finally, I get to answer a question up here.
Initially, in your production, what services you used?
Yeah, I mean, feels almost like 10 years ago, but it was actually a few years ago. Initially when we first started, and this is prefacing this, my previous startup, I spent a lot more time building a giant infrastructure for millions and millions of people, and then at the end, when we released a year later, 10 people showed up. So this time around, we kind of went the other way around. So what I did was we had one EC2 instance, bare bones instance, one RDS and a little, S3 bucket for all the images. And that was pretty much it. It was just very simple, basic, nothing crazy, no load balancers. We weren't expecting a ton of the traffic initially. And that kind of worked really well initially. And the site was just a Ruby's bare bones site that we kind of leveraged some open source software like eCommerce. And then from there, as we went through the year, we kind of progressed and added more services to our base. And the way we did that is we kind of went through, so we had one EC2 instance. Then we added a load balancer. We had multiple instances now. Now you get run into a problem, well, how do you cache all this stuff? So now we bring in Elastic Cache, and then now how do you do background processing jobs? We have Redis, and then it comes to the point where you want to scale slowly. You don't want to scale immediately for a bunch of things. Although last month we did run into a problem where the site went down for a few seconds because we had thousands and thousands of people hit our site at one very specific time. Spent a lot of time with the Amazon engineers to go through and figure out what to do, and we kind of realized that we were using RDS instances that were too small for the traffic and for the requests that we were getting. So once we upgraded that, the next time around when we had a bunch of thousands and thousands of people, nothing went down and everything was working perfectly. So I think you need to find a balance between where you see the amount of traffic, the amount of people coming to your site or your service, versus how much development time you want to do, and try to do something in between there. I was at a talk here maybe I think it was last year, it was Time Hop. They spent a lot of time in the opposite direction where they created a bunch of stuff very quickly, but then they had millions of users, and then they had so much downtime to redo all the DynamoDB stuff because they didn't account for the small length of each table, essentially. So, take a lot of time to figure out, what's the balance between scaling and development, and you kind of find something in between.
And for those they're starting now their e-commerce business running on AWS, are there any AWS services that you would say, hey, this is mandatory to start with?
There are definitely more now than when we first started, and every year Amazon keeps adding new things.
Yeah, I can think like Aurora, for example. Probably
Aurora is definitely something we use right now as well. I would start with stuff that kind of handles more of the IT and infrastructure for you, like Lightsail is a great tool. Initially, you could run any Ruby site very quickly on it. It takes like 5 minutes to set up, even if it's like a WordPress site. And as you scale up, start switching services to Elastic Beanstalk that sort of deploys for you. And then as you keep going, then go to containers. Don't start off with containers and spend like 2 months trying to configure containers. And then, by the time you figure out how to deploy your software, you're already 2 months out of your business. So
let's switch from the technology side for a second and ask you before that, how you differentiate Felix Gray from big brands or Parker and things what is your value differentiation, for example?
What we've come to stand for is a brand that represents happiness and productivity in today's screen-filled world. That's what we like to say. We do that through eyewear. So whether it's making sure that when you leave the office at 6, 8 o'clock, whatever it is, you're happy, your eyes are happy, or whether it's you have to stay late for a project and you need to be more productive and you don't want, you want to make sure your eyes aren't killing you, whatever it is, that's what we stand for. And so, Warby is kind of the pioneer of, this next phase that we're in of direct-to-consumer. And what they stand for in a lot of ways is, they stand for the one-for-one model, and they also stand for, hey, we're going to add value through the supply chain by cutting out the middleman. That's why so many other people have pioneered, piggybacked on that. We also believe in cutting out the middleman, offering something affordably. Like Chris said, if you go to a doctor's office to buy this, it's going to be a lot more expensive. But in addition, it's, okay, well, how do you make a lens that fits the needs of 2018? Today, I was waiting for the subway, I was scrolling through Instagram, I got on the subway, I'm reading a book on my iPad, get into work, I open up my laptop. Tonight, I'm gonna go home, watch some Netflix, open up my laptop again, do some work, go to bed. That's probably most people's day, depressingly. And for us, it's, okay, well, how do you bring happiness and productivity in this world where it is totally in front of screens? And I think that brand differentiation is really key, because at the end of the day, when someone goes, oh man, my eyes are really bugging me, or I'm in front of the computer a lot, maybe this isn't great for me. Someone suggests Felix Gray. They don't say, oh, go to Warby Parker. They say, oh, you should check out Felix Gray.
Now, I read an article that I think you were quoted that behind your business, the core foundation is technology and science. Can you elaborate on that sentence? Like, how do you really grasp like technology and science to empower your business?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's from a couple ways. So I'll let these guys talk on like the internet side, but on the lens side, there's a few different ways to filter blue light. You can either have a yellow lens that's going to be effective, but you don't look like one of the X-Men, and most people don't want to walk around like that all day. You can have like what's called a blue light filtering coating or a UV 420 lens, which is going to be basically clear, but it's going to be ineffective. It's going to filter only around 25% of the blue light range, or you can do what we do with our proprietary lens, which basically we've taken this naturally occurring ocular pigment that happens in like very trace quantities. You embed it into the lens. You add a couple other materials into that lens. And so it looks virtually clear. At the same time, it's an effective way of filtering blue light. It's filtering the right nanometer ranges. It's filtering up to 50% of like the whole blue light range. And so that's on the lens side, the material science side, how we build science and technology into the product. I'll let these guys talk about the website.
Before starting this, I don't think I touched a single, no experience on any platform that we run on today before this, right? So it really was learning pieces of technology. Everyone's like familiar with like social media accounts, but not paid social, right? We never learned that. Or how the website has to function, how backorder works, how automated emails work. There is actually a physical component to this. There's a global supply chain, but for what we're doing every day in the office, every single thing can be done from a MacBook. That was actually a pretty good thing about the Office Try-On program as well, because we're able to work on things, because all we needed was an internet connection. So quite literally every piece of the business, of the site, of the store is technology currently. There might be some offline things.
And there's also a lot that you don't see behind the website that goes around. When they told me about it and they wanted me to join the team initially, I was like,
he laughed.
I laughed. I did.
What am I going to do?
Like,
it's like 3 pages on a site. Who cares? I'm like, trust me.
I'm still taking that back today. So there's so much in the back end of operations to, take a product from A to B and then all the steps in between, tracking inventory. Especially the way Glass's inventory works is much more complicated than just selling a mattress or a toothbrush. There's like multiple components to it. There's prescription and RX is a whole new, ball game. There's HIPAA compliance and making sure everything on AWS is encrypted, and you have to spend months in thinking of how to do that. So, you kind of see on the website, it's like a few pages you click through, but, there's like thousands and thousands of, even now hundreds of thousands of lines of code behind everything that happens. And the other piece is like, there's a lot of data that flows through. We have a bunch of data that goes to our RDS and we analyze it through Periscope and kind of have other services to go through all of that data and figure out, where we can constantly improve the user experience.
Just a couple examples, like to make that more definitive. So when you get your prescription, you need to know your pupillary distance, right? So you need to know the distance between your pupils in order for our opticians to actually make sure that the pair of glasses is going to fit you. If you go into a store, they're doing that in person. We actually ask you to send a picture with your credit card, and we built a tool that's able to measure the distance between your pupils. Another example is when we used to be on a third-party logistics system that did not speak back to our system. So when the returns and exchanges and all these things happening, that stuff had to be manually tracked, which gets really messy as you get bigger. So we had to build out our own shipping inventory system, and that means that you have to have families and groupings because different lenses can go to different frames and you're keeping those separately. So that's another thing. And then, when we think of marketing, okay, how do we improve the customer experience? So almost 20% of our non-RX glasses, right? So we sell both prescription and non-prescription. If you have contacts at 20/20, you can wear the non-prescription glasses. But 20% of those customers are contact wearers that also wear prescription. So now how do we get that data of, okay, we know that you're a contact wearer, how do we feed that back into our email marketing system to know, okay, this person is a contact wearer that should also fall into a drip campaign that's touting the prescription stuff. And so those are all things that really you have to integrate, piece together, and make sure that they're functioning. So there's a lot of different ways to make sure that technology can either support the growth of the company or excel the growth of the company.
Yeah, and I think you actually get to segue to a question where in e-commerce usually, and I know it, I work for a company called Amazon, but there is emphasis on automation. How do you leverage automation? Like, someone adds something to the shopping cart, abandon the site, or, aggregate reviews, things of that nature. Any tools that you can share, like you're using for automation that you build or third party?
Yeah, I mean, automation it's necessary for any business that's trying to scale, especially in e-commerce. Like the shopping cart is the new bookmark, is the modern day bookmark, right? Like you can talk to a company in any space that has an online cart. There's a ton of people that add to cart, expecting to come back to it. I think everybody has that. I'm like, if I added this to the cart, I show more interest inside, or with myself than something else. I'll remember to go back to do this. But we're all aware of how much information is out there today, right? There's so much information between social feeds, news feeds, TV, you name it. You need to remind those people that did show interest originally. So, we use things like email drip campaigns that have to be timed out correctly. With you don't want to overload somebody. You want to become annoying, right? So you set those up in a way that just is a friendly reminder. That's email. Pixel activity. Every single thing is pixel activity, which does the same thing in a retargeting sense. It'll show you that ad again, or it'll come back with different messaging, which is great because it allows you to differentiate a customer who has something in the cart versus someone that you're speaking to for the first time. You should speak to that potential customer different. But it also helps with like lookalike audiences. Almost every single platform out there has one based off pixel activity or CSV feeds. That really allows a small company like ours to reach the masses without, there's only so many, depending on platform, there's only so many ways you can go try to build your ideal customer on a platform with what data they have available and say, okay, we're going to be able to scale this to 200 million Americans. Lookalike audiences based off pixel activity, or because you can configure the pixel activity in so many ways and use different logic to really hone in on who you're trying to reach. So those are two big ways that automation really helps. Automation is great. Again, it needs to be used in any business that scales. However, I will say that it's good to gut check kind of automation. There's a lot of platforms that every platform claims that they have the silver bullet in that sense, right? And like, we're going to do everything for you. You don't have to touch it. It's everywhere. It's good to kind of take a step back. I think it's something that we probably, again, with the Office Try-On, we kind of learned just to double check that automation is actually doing what it says it is. But it comes everything down to even after the customer has bought, right? Like automation to send the reminder to send in your prescription if you add prescription to cart, to take your PD photo, to process that. If there is an exchange or something, it's automated to send them the label. You want to make it as easy, because everybody is so busy, you want to make it as easy as possible. To do so, automation is absolutely necessary.
Yeah, and you mentioned the customer journey, but your end user are coming from website, coming also on mobile devices, right? The user depends on the mobile devices.
Yep.
And sometimes you as a software company, it can be a pain, right? To start supporting different mobile, like what tools, like tips you can give, like how to support all the Android and the iPhones and then different iOS version. I know there is one that waits for me. I didn't upgrade
That's
yet.
a great question, because today we were tackling this issue of getting this one circle to look right across every device, and it's taking forever. Especially when you roll in like IE11. I know who uses IE11 anymore, but actually like 10% of our traffic now is like IE11. So we have to make sure it looks right for every tool. And the problem is that there are plenty of tools out there. But at the end of the day, you still have to go into each one of these browsers, and they have tools to switch off to mobile versions so you could kind of see how it looks. And then we kind of ask people in our office that have these actual physical devices to actually go on them, see how it looks, how it works, and try to keep iterating and making improvements as you go along, see where the user drops off, see where they click on, where they don't click on. Why did the user stop at this location, and kind of figure out how to improve the user experience as much as you can. Because there's always room for improvement. It's just a matter of figuring out where.
Yeah, heat maps and this sort have been pretty useful for that, especially for mobile, to figure out like what's in reach. We can have this good idea, especially because when you're building a brand too, it's not just Amazon is very much information first, right? Like it's all information there. We do have this kind of brand and these cool illustrations. So when you're putting all that into a site, a web, on web, it's pretty easy to fit all of it. On mobile, you have a lot less real estate to add all that in. So things like heat maps allow us to figure out, like, is this useful to the customer journey or not? Or as Houtan mentioned, where are people dropping off? So then you implement something like chat, right? Where can we help these customers at where there seem to be pain points? So chat's been a pretty good one. But before we go into diagnosing everything, heat maps help quite a bit. Just to, again, gut check, like, when we go through the designs and wireframes, it might look great, but does it actually help the customer? Heat maps help a lot with that.
And it's a good, you mentioned data and you mentioned like heat maps. Eventually, every e-commerce where they start, I see them, they are more on the descriptive analytics. Hey, how much I sell, how many visitors, etc. But in today's era of machine learning, artificial intelligence, augmented reality, virtual reality, where Felix Gray is now heading with this. Are you looking at this area as well?
Oh, yes, of course, every day. As we continue to scale and grow out, we are looking for ways to both make the customer experience better and also our operations and our back-end experience better. So one thing we're kind of trying to look at is how we can leverage SageMaker from AWS, funnel in our operations data into there. So when do we reorder more pairs? At one point in the month, do we see sales here? So when we should, because there is a bunch of lead time to get these, glasses to San Diego and everything. So where do we kind of get and put all this data together from our data sources so we can do all this from the backside? You also mentioned AR. The other thing is from the user-facing perspective, how we can do virtual try-ons for people. They can try a pair on without actually physically touching it. Just hold your phone. iPhone 10 has a bunch of sensors now that allows you to do it in a much better way than all the other phones do. So we're constantly trying to figure out ways to, leverage these technologies and not just, just for fun. Yeah.
Yeah, no, I'm excited to be part of this journey because really, like ML now, it's for every decision making you're doing from business perspective, you're using data. For early stage startups or e-commerce that they started, like your top 5 tips for them who started the journey, like based on your journey so far, like what would be your top 5, tips, technology, business-wise, like things that I wish I knew that before I started.
As you start to grow, hiring is the most important thing. If you have good people that you've hired and that are self-starters that can run with things, and the best things are when I don't even realize that there was a problem, and then I'm like, oh, there was a problem. Okay, cool, because there's other people that are taking care of that stuff for you, or people that are saying, oh yeah, we decided to, do this, which is now improving the business by this, and like I didn't even have a hand in that. As someone who's kind of at this part and like not always in the day-to-day, it's really helpful to have amazing people that are helping grow and support the business every day. The other thing I would say in terms of the technology and where you're building, it's just as important to support the business as it is to focus on growing the business. So I think in the beginning, you're just going to focus on growth, and that's great. But at some point, for like us as a brand, there were multiple times where the site went down, or we didn't have enough stock, or different things like that, or we had shipment delays, and all these different things that end up actually hurting your brand, hurting your story, and can actually negatively impact growth. So I think what Hoots was saying earlier, it's really important to not build so far ahead, but like if you're on this part of the curve, if you're like here, like start building like here for you to get to here. Don't build for like all the way down here, but make sure that you are not running with your head cut off all the time, which definitely happened to us a lot.
Yeah, and kind of to build on that, I think it is staying focused on what you want to accomplish. Like, there's so many things you can do, right? Like that's the startup, right? Like we want to go out, conquer the world. Staying focused on projects that make the most sense and how they relate to other parts of the business. It ties into what both of them said, is picking the right thing, understanding it, measuring it, being as sure as possible on it before you just cast out to everything. And I think another important thing to know for really any company is knowing your customer. Again, I think we were able to do that pretty well. We were wannabe customers of a product like this, so that helped. But going out and really getting to know, like, okay, you know, what's different about what a developer does all day as opposed to an investment banker, as opposed to a designer, as opposed to someone who works at a non-for-profit. Their days are different. They all, the common denominator is they all use computer screens and phone screens to do it. But what are the actual habits of it? You know, we do have, one of our lens SKUs we offer is a reader or with a slight magnification. Not perfect for everybody, but if you're staring in terminal all day or you're in an Excel sheet all day, it does work well. If you are someone who's leading meetings, but you're still on the computer quite a bit, but you spend a lot of time interacting with colleagues, that little bit of magnification is not for you, right? It's to be used within a couple feet. Looking up and looking away or walking conference room to conference room can get disorienting. So understanding your customers' work habits, your customers' senses. The other thing is sense of style, right? Like, you know, you walk into an investment bank and everyone's in a suit and tie. You walk into a startup, it's completely different. How do you need to make sure you have a product mix if you want to address all those customers that can be spread across all of them and not too focused on one. We like to say Felix Gray is for everyone. So it is important to know who everyone is so that we don't exclude anybody.
And how to tailor that message.
It also relates to your want to focus, and then I think knowing your customer.
Yeah, knowing it, exactly. Again, trying to address each of them, understanding that before you just go and say, like, we can't just say, like, okay, let's do 100 frames, right? Let's put a global supply chain into motion with 100 frames and see what sticks. No, you need to put the work in to know your customer and then to try to order correctly and put things out in the market correctly.
And I guess the other, from a tech side of things, is as you're building, constantly iterate. Go through and like look at, have an idea, test it, see if it works. If it doesn't, go back to the drawing board. Just keep doing it quickly. And, you know, like Mark Zuckerberg says, fail fast. You know, if you have a small tech team or don't have a tech team at all, look for stuff and tools that kind of do all the work or most of the work for you. You know, if you have performance issues, then look at like stuff like Datadog or New Relic. If you have issues with, you know, if you need something that sends email out, you know, Amazon SES could work initially. Then you start to move up, you could do SendGrid, or you could use, there's many tools that you can use out there that make your life a lot easier if you don't have the technology in place at that time. But as you start to scale up, you'll realize that you'll start to need to build out your own tech for a lot of things. So it's kind of a balance of finding, you know, what is out there that can help you at that period of time and then working your way up to your own solution.
Awesome. We have some questions from the audience, so we'll pick some. What made you choose AWS over other cloud services like Microsoft Azure?
It's a great question. I get that question a lot, actually. I think initially for me, it was the ease of use of AWS. On other cloud providers, I won't name who. Initially, for example, I'll give you this example, which drove me nuts. You deploy a server, and the server is not on automatically. And that to me is like, you're building something in the cloud. Why is it not on automatically? That kind of drove me nuts. So there's a lot of like back and forth and, you know, trying to figure things out with other cloud services where AWS kind of like just works. And there's a lot of tools that AWS has built around their other components that let you automate and build and constantly build on top. Also, they have an amazing startup program. They, you know, if you're with an accelerator, they give you, I believe, $100K for the first year or 10K for each of the first 2 years. The support system, this loft, and just everyone's trying to help you and keep you growing.
Thanks. Are you hosting your enterprise software like your ERP with your eCommerce? Like it's all running on AWS? Like do you have like third-party ERP systems?
No, so we don't right now have a full-blown ERP system. We have everything that's done in-house on AWS.
So it's all in-house like systems that you built?
Yep.
Okay, last question. Feel free to post more, but last one. What is your launch plan for the Amazon.com marketplace?
I've been asked that for a little bit.
It's a tricky one.
Yeah.
I think that with Amazon,
This is my time.
there's kind of a safe space for brands when they're selling direct to consumer, and you're able to really tailor that messaging and tailor that experience. So really don't have any plans to launch specifically with to sell on Amazon.com, though Amazon Ads is an interesting new development that Amazon has really been growing and pushing in the past few years. So that represents some opportunity. But, you know, we don't do any wholesale opportunity. We don't sell anywhere besides our site. And it's because it's really important to control that brand messaging, particularly for a product, for any brand, but then particularly for a product that deals with like some of this science-heavy stuff and how to make that stuff engaging and interesting. It's not, I could probably put you to sleep talking about like how blue light is getting filtered, and like we don't want to do that. We want to be educational, not boring, and we find that we're really able to do that through our own site and not through others.
Yeah, and just to add on that, you know, it's there are a lot of efficiencies realized when you do something like that with Amazon, but we have an interesting challenge with so much of our business being non-prescription. So there's a lot of folks that wear eyewear that have never worn glasses before, which takes the right messaging, the right customer service, the right communication with them at all points. And it just, you know, I guess you'd never say never, but like right now we're doing a pretty good job at doing that ourselves. And making sure, I think that the brand and the messaging with the relationship with the customers has to come first in a product like this, because there is education around it. There are people buying things that they've never worn before. To trust that, as good as the partner may be, I think we all sleep a little better at night knowing that we control it.
And then I guess one other thing, which is, yeah, it's always funny, you talk about like the consumer face side, but also then the other side, the glasses industry and actually like edging, which is taking a lens and cutting into a frame, and you keep lenses and frames separately. It's a whole different way of actually fulfilling a product, which is, it's not a normal 3PL. And so that's really important too. It's not just the front facing, okay, maybe it does make sense to control the brand messaging, but it's also, hey, do the behind the scenes operations actually make sense for the platform that we'd be using?
Yeah, and I think, Houtan, you mentioned something like, we skipped that, but you have like all the HIPAA compliance, and you know, you have prescriptions, etc. And really one of the things that I know also from customers I work, like you need to choose the services that are HIPAA compliant, right? AWS has like 170 plus services, and some of them are not HIPAA yet, some of them are HIPAA, so you need to make sure that you're using that because it will be audited. So that's also part of like when you select the technology. Yeah, fun question. Houtan, you mentioned you were not interested in working with an e-commerce company. What made you change your mind?
He just says that.
Oh, man. What made me change my mind was like just the team, and the team was really like, you have to understand, it's like you have to enjoy what you do every day. If you don't, then it just doesn't make sense, and like you'll end up just hating your life. So the team that,
put it bluntly.
Yes, to put it bluntly, you know, they were a really cool team. I hung out with them for a while, way before.
Tell the accelerator story.
Yeah. So we actually sat, when I had my previous startup, we sat right next to each other in the accelerator program that we were in, which was ERA. So we sat right next to each other, and they had like tech questions, and they would ask me, and I would help them out, and I would get frustrated because I was like, why would you do it this way? I'll just do it. So I had a little bit of insight before I joined their team and into what they were doing. And the reason I kind of did e-commerce is because it was different from everything else I have done in the past. So I did app development. I've done stuff from AI, machine learning. I've done stuff with embedded systems. I've done everything, and e-commerce was something new for me. And I was just like, this is a nice challenge, and I'm going to do it. And it's been a journey since then.
I want to tout his horn for 1 second. So I think that there's a lot of really capable tech people. I think you don't come across everyday tech people that are also the understanding of the business implications and building business-driven tech. And so when we actually say, okay, we're going to build this, we're going to integrate this, we're going to upgrade this, or whatever it happens, it's coming from a business decision of like, whether, hey, how are we going to make this customer experience better, or how are we going to enable our CX team to have more time on their hands to do other things to make the customer experience better. And so Hoots is really good on that front too, of like, not just saying there's a ton of cool tech you can build out. It's, does it make sense for the business? And balancing that is really important in a CTO.
Wow, that's a great
I never
compliment.
compliment
It is
you.
Yeah,
true.
I know. I've never gotten any compliments. Thank you.
And you mentioned you are all about technology and science. And what advice you would give to a startup that cannot build their own platform, like they want to use platform like eCommerce or Shopify?
Well, then I would, yeah, like I said, I would go with a platform that's readily available, like Shopify, maybe Magento. There's a bunch of platforms out there that you can readily use. They're very simple to put together. You just have to realize that they will, and most likely will not be scalable solutions. So somewhere down the line, you're going to have to hire someone to kind of take that and turn it into a much more scalable solution.
You mentioned hiring is important, but it's hard. Like, is there any type of tech that Felix Gray used to help to make you more competitive in the market for talent? I assume Ruby is not one of them, right? But
No.
It's the stack.
We do some computer vision stuff. We definitely are going to be doing some machine learning. There are a bunch of tech that you don't see necessarily that we kind of do on the back end. And there's Python. There's every kind of language you can name. We've been trying to use here and there. Just because you see a website doesn't mean that the website is the only thing of the business. There are many more tech components to it. And I think, it's a challenge. And I think there's so many challenges, and that's what you should be striving for, is to take on these challenges and get them done.
Yeah, I also think that to that point that I really like working with developers. Again, it's like people like Hoot said they're not focused on, hey, we're not using, we only just started moving into Node a few months ago. I mean, it didn't make sense for the business until that point. So it's same thing with working with designers. You can work with these designers that are going to design this ridiculous shit that is so unnecessary. Yeah. And it's going to slow down load times. It's going to do this. It's going to do that. It's going to lead to a bad user experience, but it's going to look cool. That's not someone that I'm interested in working with. I'm interested in someone that's going to put the team first and say, okay, this is good for the team, and let's build that stuff that way, as opposed to saying, hey, this would be the coolest thing. This is the newest piece of tech. We should do it, even if it doesn't make sense.
Yeah, and back to hiring. When you hire and you have candidates, other than being self-starter, where when you grow your team, any specific Felix Gray questions you ask in the interview, something specifically that match your culture, or anything you think that is something you're looking at as a
Are you willing to have fun? That's the
That's part of it. I think we've been really lucky to hire through referrals and people that we already knew. That's changed a little bit, but we work with before we hire anybody we work with them for quite a while. But coming through an accelerator, that's how we found Hootie. We knew exactly what it was going to be like working with him before he started. But almost our entire team has come through. It hasn't really just been resumes dropped off that we have to go. There was, I guess a couple that we found that way, but a lot of the core early team, it was through people we knew that already had great reports with people that we trusted and advisors we trusted, which makes quite a difference.
And as we've grown, we've started to now hire people that we don't know. I think the most important thing is actually asking a few questions and letting people talk. Mm-hmm. And when you just let people talk and you don't, I think there's a problem when you're interviewing people and you ask these questions where it's very clear what you want the answer to be. And so the interviewee is able to just kind of give you the answer you want to hear because you've phrased in this leading question. And so if you keep it much more open-ended and and you let that person talk and you're just kind of then internalizing and saying, okay, well, they did this. How does that action relate to how they would act at Felix Gray? That's a really helpful way, and just keeping it super, super open, letting people talk and you just listen.
Yeah, I think from a tech side, if you're doing a tech hire, give them a real world problem. Don't just throw Google questions at them, because that's not what you kind of want. You kind of want someone that can think through and go through your day-to-day, activity. For example, one interview I did, I had
some inventory portion that I was working on. I just had that function block and it was just very blank, nothing there. I was like, how would you write this? How would you do it? And most people like couldn't do it, and some people could, and then the one that did it really well is the one we actually ended up hiring, and it's been amazing.
Nice. That's good. Great outsourcing for your.
Shout out
Shout out
to Jared,
Jared, yeah.
in the back.
I will take one last question. So, any revolutionary use of technology plan like 3D printing?
Yeah, we already are
We
using
do that. It's a really quick and rapid way of prototyping for frames.
Awesome. Okay, I think our time's up. Thank you so much. I learned a lot. It's great meeting you. Thank you all for coming.
Thank you, guys.
Thank you.